Welcome to the Putback on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider and host of the show. We're going to go through the Knicks-Pistons series in detail. We got two great guests with us. We've got Newsday's Steve Popper. He's been around the team for a long time, traveling with the team, on the road, at home. So he's been all over the Knicks for a while now. And a special guest, Coty M. Davis, Detroit Pistons beat writer for the Detroit News. His first year on the beat, but he's gotten to know this team very, very well. So we're looking forward to his insights. And as always, gentlemen, we're going to get started with the baseline. Now, the Knicks finished the regular season with 51 wins, beating Brooklyn on Sunday. This is a Knicks team that has reached this 50-win plateau twice in a row. And really, you look back at the recent history of this franchise, there's no question this period is right up there with the best of the last 20, 25 years. But I don't know. I get the sense, Steve, I don't know what you think. I get the sense that there's a lot of nervous energy maybe among the fan base, and I think rightfully so. But I want to know, how would you assess the season overall thought?
Yeah, it's amazing how spoiled we get in New York after a lot of 17-win seasons. 51-win season feels almost disappointing. I think the expectations were just high because you took a team and you sort of went all in. After last year's 50-win, a team that probably should have gone to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then you add the talent of Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges. You sort of go all in around Jalen Brunson, and there just has been something missing this year. And look, I think it's going to be tested right away with Detroit, because Detroit looks like the sort of team that the Knicks were and that the fans loved. They're tough, they're overachieving, hardworking young team. It's going to be interesting right away to see how they pass this test. And look, I think, it may sound like an exaggeration, but I think if the Knicks don't get past the first round somehow, there's going to be changes probably.
Yes.
I know there's been a lot of pressure. People mentioned Tom Thibodeau. I've heard rumors, front office stuff could happen. Mikal Bridges is up for an extension, and there's going to, a decision's got to be made whether you think long term he's the answer that you thought he was when you gave up 5 first-round picks for him. To me, this is a real make or break period that's going to tell you what this season was, more than the 51 wins.
I agree with you, Steve. Coty, I want to hear you on the Pistons, but I just want to add in here. Yeah. Is this a team that just was tired at the end of the regular season, or was not really engaged at the end of the regular season, and is going to show the Knicks fan base and the NBA what they are, that they really are this 51-win 3 seed, and they're going to come out strong against the Pistons? And if not, I mean, I've been writing about it, and Steve, I'm with you. I do think that there's a strong possibility, a solid possibility that changes are coming if they flame out against Detroit, or even if they're non-competitive in the second round against the Boston Celtics. I think earlier this year, somebody asked me about Tom Thibodeau, and I thought, just based on everything that had happened, everything that I'd heard coming into the year, I didn't think there was a scenario where the Knicks would change their head coach. But now, more recently, just having conversations with people and seeing kind of which way the wind is blowing, I think this is the stakes are high for Tom Thibodeau going into this postseason.
I'd say 2 things there. One, that there's a lot of finger pointing that happens in this organization. Yes. In its history. Whenever anything goes wrong, a 3-game losing streak brings that out. And look, we've seen what's happened with some coaches that have been to the finals, have been coach of the year in just recent days, months this season. I don't think anything's assured. And I think what Tom Thibodeau has done for this organization is tremendous. But you see Mike Malone get let go in Denver. There's just expectations, and if you don't live up to them, even with the contract extension kicking in, at some point there's always fire where there's smoke.
Right. And maybe a little bit more stability right now in Detroit with the team that Coty is covering with JB Bickerstaff and co. Coty, what did you make of what you saw from this team across the season?
Just overall, that this team has finally got through the dark stages of their rebuild. And look, I think we all can agree that none of us expected the Detroit Pistons to be this good. I mean, you take a look at the fact that they finished the season 44-38. It's their best record since the 2015-2016 campaign. And you also had an opportunity to experience here in Detroit one of the best one-year turnaround in league history. And if somebody want to argue the best one-year turnaround in league history, I would give them the opportunity to do so, because if you go back and you take a look at some of the best one-year turnarounds throughout league history, of course, the number one, the best one-year turnaround that everybody likes to talk about is the Boston Celtics. 2007, they finished with what, 20, 21 wins, and then the following year they go on and win the championship, and I believe they finished the regular season, correct me if I'm wrong, like 64 to 67 wins or whatever the case might be. However, you look at a situation where they added not one, but two Hall of Famers in Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett to go along with Paul Pierce. You know, you can even go all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s when you take a look at the turnarounds the Lakers had in terms of building their dynasty, the turnarounds that the Boston Celtics had in terms of building their dynasty, where they added two guys that's in the top 10 of all time in Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. The only thing the Detroit Pistons did was added Tim Hardaway, Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, and JB Bickerstaff, four guys who a lot of people were kind of making fun of at the end of last season, especially somebody like Tim Hardaway Jr., who was literally benched as the Dallas Mavericks went on their NBA final run. Nobody knew what to expect from this organization. The Pistons is coming off a season where they went 14-28, had the longest losing streak in league history. Everybody's making jokes about them. So it's like, okay, you know they're not going to be as bad as they have been over the last 2 years, but if everything goes right, they probably will finish the season 10th in the Eastern Conference and literally the first team that's going to be eliminated out the play-in tournament. They didn't just make the playoffs. they bypassed the play-in tournament in general. And then when you take a look at the fact, every single one of those veterans that I just alluded to, they play well. All of the young guys outside of Cade Cunningham, when you look at Jalen Durham, when you take a look at Asar Thompson, when you take a look at Ron Holland, a rookie that they drafted with the number 5 overall pick, there's been on several occasions, Coach JB Bickerstaff has talked about his ability to go out there and make winning plays. You look at Isaiah Stewart becoming the defensive anchor. You look at so many young guys, even Jaden Ivey before he went down with his potential season-ending leg injury, the steps that he took. Like, this team literally buckled down in the offseason. They added in the right veterans. They got the right head coach. They went back and got that Detroit basketball identity of grit and physicality. And that's part of the reason why, matter of fact, that's the main reason why we're sitting here talking about the Pistons in the playoffs as the number 6 seed playing against the New York Knicks. And some people, I don't really know how many people are going to look and say that the Pistons are going to come away victorious, but it's part of the reason why you look at this series and say this is going to be arguably one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive first round series that we have here in the NBA.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Cody, you mentioned a lot of factors. You forgot to mention yourself, though. First year on the beat, I think you deserve some credit for this turnaround. This is it's remarkable.
Blame James Edwards.
Yeah, our guy James Edwards. His winning percentage is not strong. Jalen Brunson, Cade Cunningham, guys. Steve, we watched Cade Cunningham in the Garden have his way with the Knicks. What do you think they do against Cade? What's their approach, do you think, against Cade? And can the Knicks win this point guard battle?
Well, I think they can because two things. One, the postseason is different than the regular season, and this is Cade's first time around there. Jalen last year, 4 straight 40-point plus games. He's shown that he can do this on the biggest stage. Cade is going to not only have to kind of live with the pressure of being the guy who's lifting this team. You can talk about the veterans, but Cade is the engine of that team. And the Knicks just can come at him in waves defensively. And look, this is sort of I guess a statement on the moves you made. You went with Bridges, you went with Anunoby, you signed that huge contract in the summer. And this is the sort of task you're asking them to do, is to take on the role of stopping him. They haven't had a lot of luck defensively against him this year. Although I think Jalen did average more against them than Cade averaged against the Knicks, even in the regular season. I just feel like the experience of Brunson, he sort of knows how to run this thing. He's got help offensively in ways that Cade doesn't have. Karl Anthony Towns can sort of score at will when he wants to. Also, I just feel like the advantage is the defensive bodies that the Knicks can throw at Cade, and then the help that Brunson gets offensively sort of gives him the nod here. As good as Cade has been this year, and he deservedly might wind up either on the same All NBA team or ahead of Jalen this year.
It's you talk to people around the league, and I think regardless of what happens in this particular series, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of it, but I think Cade Cunningham is going to be up there among the top Eastern Conference guards for a long time if he stays healthy, and hopefully he does. Just great to see him put it all together like he has. But Brunson, the playoffs with the Knicks, been fantastic. 30 points per game, 6.6 assists, 40 minutes, plus minus plus 40. He's been the engine for them, and he's proved that he can do it on this stage again and again. So, yeah, I do think experience plays a role there. But, Coty, I'm just curious, how do you see the group in Detroit, Cade in particular, handling this atmosphere, just playoff atmosphere in general, but also at the Garden?
Well, they already swept the Knicks in the Garden during the regular season. But as everyone knows, and even though this is my first time being part of a NBA playoff, covering the NBA playoff series, everyone knows the playoffs is a different atmosphere. The game slows down. You get more opportunity to hone in and focus on one opponent, to focus in on a top 10, top 15 player. And, that's when you start looking at whether or not how much the experience of this really is going to come into play. But that's the one thing that really concerns me the most about the Pistons going into this playoff series. One, whether or not they're going to have an opportunity to have the experience needed. You have some veterans that you have leaned upon throughout this whole entire season, but at the end of the day, most of your core guys, Cade, Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, Ron Holland, Simone Fontecchio, even Isaiah Stewart, like all of your core guys, they are young and they do not have that playoff experience. So that's one aspect of it. And then two, and most importantly, do Cade Cunningham have enough help around him? Because once again, in the playoffs, they're going to have an opportunity to focus in on him a little bit more. And look, Cade in the regular season, he played really well against the New York Knicks. You're looking at a situation, I believe he has the 9th or the 10th highest scoring average against the Knicks in the regular season, scoring 30 points per game and to go along with 8.5 assists. So you're looking at a situation where he really has been somewhat of a one-man show. However, in the playoffs, we know that could be a detriment on whether or not they could advance moving forward. And I also look at it from a standpoint when you take a look at this point guard battle. Jalen Brunson, he has been one of the best playoff performers over the last couple of games. You guys already alluded to it. Since he became a member of the New York Knicks, he has scored an average of 30-something points per game, which is like 3rd or 4th in the NBA since the 2023 campaign. So you're looking at a situation where not only will JB Bickerstaff and the Pistons will have to find a way on how do they get Cade Cunningham enough help, but at the same time, how do they go about slowing down Jalen Brunson, a guy, yes, I understand it, I get it. He is coming off a very bad ankle injury that sidelined him for a little bit over a month, correct me if I'm wrong, and he looked a little bit rusty, coming back and stuff, but at the end of the day, this is the playoffs. I think he probably got enough rest in terms of getting himself back into game shape. And you're looking at a situation, and they're also going to be at home. This is going to be an opportunity for Jalen Brunson to be quote unquote playoff Jalen Brunson in hopes of giving the Knicks that extra boost that they need. And one more thing about Cade in terms of whether or not he's going to have enough help. Another thing that concerns me, I think this is where the Pistons are definitely going to miss the production of Jaden Ivey, because I look at it from a standpoint that was arguably, if not the second best player that the Pistons had. Yes, they have put together a winning record without him. However, as I just alluded to, the playoffs are a different game, and I think this is where it's going to hurt them the most.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely the depth is going to be interesting to me. And then you look at the bigs, Cody and Steve. And obviously, this is Karl Anthony Towns, his first postseason as a Knick. 18 points or 19 points per game, 10.2 rebounds, 46% from the field in his career in the postseason. The 12-19 record. Obviously, Minnesota had that great run last season to the conference final. Steve, you've watched Karl all year. What do you think it's going to be in the playoffs? I mean, late regular season, he wasn't shooting a ton of threes. And to me, the hierarchy gets a little funky sometimes on offense. What do you see from Cat coming up against Detroit?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. He has all season, and look, this is sort of to his credit. He's deferred. We've heard from day one. He calls Jalen Brunson Cap.
Mm-hmm.
It's always captain. He defers to him as that this is his team. This is a time where maybe he has to not do that and sort of I think he's got an advantage here. As much as I respect Isaiah Stewart's defense, Jalen Duren's strength and toughness, this is Cat is one of the elite scoring big men in probably in NBA history. And when you consider the skill, the versatile skills, he's a guy who can get guys in foul trouble. He can cause a lot of havoc here. To me, I would run him right at those guys consistently, attacking. When the last game they played here, it was the Pistons sort of let Precious Achiuwa kind of be the offensive, the attack for the Knicks, that they were going to let him shoot. That's not going to happen here. Precious, I'm not sure if he even sees the court in this series.
Right.
Right. So I just think you attack with Towns, let him offensively set the tone. And I think when we talk about big men, look, I think a healthy Mitchell Robinson makes a world of difference for the Knicks. Not so much in defending Duren and Stewart, but he's a rim protector like no other. That you're gonna, I think when we talk about Cade and the athleticism of some of these guys, having Mitchell back there is a huge factor. That I think we haven't seen it in 2 years. It's just, he's a guy that's now healthy, and I think they've played that right to get him sort of rhythm, sort of healthy, and he could be a factor in this series.
Yeah, no, I think that in a perfect world for the Knicks, he will be. But Cody, one thing I wanted to ask you back to Jalen Brunson is, how do you think Detroit matches up against Jalen? Who do they throw at him?
You have to start off with your best perimeter defender, and that's Asar Thompson. And I know when you take a look at it, you're looking at a second-year guy going up against arguably one of the, not arguably, but one of the best guards in the NBA, and arguably a top 3 guard in the Eastern Conference. But at the same time, Asar Thompson, man, that young man, him and his brother, man, he is just so gifted on the defensive side of the ball. And I think he is definitely going to be one of the biggest X factors in terms of whether or not the Pistons can not only win this series, but whether or not they can make it competitive and make it a tough series like everyone is expecting. Because Asar Thompson, man, he could guard positions 4 through 1, and you take a look at it from a standpoint that he is going to be one of the guys that's going to, one of his most important responsibilities will be whether or not that you're going to have an opportunity to slow Jalen Brunson down. And that's going to be the number one key for the Pistons. What do you do with this guy who has averaged over 30 points in his playoff series with the Knicks? So that's going to be one aspect of it. Another aspect is going to be when you switch, who's going to step up and be the person that's going to switch. Will it be somebody like Tobias Harris? Will it be someone like, even though he's a rookie, once again, he has made winning plays. You look at Ron Holland, he has shown the ability to be a solid defender. So the Pistons, they have a multitude of ways on how they could defend and slow Jalen Brunson down, but it's going to start with the second-year forward in Asar Thompson.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup. The chess match to watch within the game is going to be a lot of fun there. I want to get to the other entities in this series, particularly the wings, and that to me is fascinating because you got Josh Hart, you got Anunoby and Bridges, and obviously Anunoby and Bridges. I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, they'll throw one of those guys on Cade, right? I would think maybe Anunoby, and maybe they mix a diet of those two guys at Cade. What do you think there?
It's funny. I looked up the numbers this year, and the by far the best defender against him, statistically at least, according to NBA.com, was Mikal. They used McBride at times. They used Anunoby at times, and I'm kind of surprised that he had kind of had his way there. I'd still go with Anunoby. He's just when you see him day in and day out, he is just a monster. How strong he is, how controlling he is. I think the one advantage the Knicks have here with those guys is they're so versatile. It can be Bridges, it can be Anunoby, and it can be Hart. All three of those guys are very good defenders, good size, good strength. Well, good strength except for maybe Bridges, but I think you just want to keep Jalen off him. You want to keep Towns off him. Any of those other three can do the job. But I think there's going to be a lot of help here. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's Bridges to start with Anunoby sort of helping in the way he does, the way he kind of pounces on guys. It'll be interesting to see it. But this is where I say, when we look at the numbers that Cade has put up against them, when you give Tom Thibodeau, who is an elite defensive coach, you give him a week to prepare. Plus, he said yesterday they've been preparing for 2 weeks already for this, doing the advanced film work and stuff. When you give him weeks and you've got one series where he's facing a guy, he's going to take away the best things that Cade does. So it's going to be interesting to see how Cade, as a young player, responds to that. When they start doing things to get the ball out of his hands, how does the help, on his side, help him out, sort of relieving that pressure? How willingly does he, not fight the double team? It's going to be interesting to see what Thibodeau does and sort of the chess game, how he responds to it.
Yeah, and on the other side, JB Bickerstaff, Coach of the Year candidate, deservedly so. That series a couple of years ago, Knicks and Cavs, I think Thibodeau did a pretty good job coaching just the chess match in that series. And so I wonder what you're going to see from JB. Obviously, not the same thing at all. Different team, different personnel, but same head coach. So it's going to be interesting to me to see that the Thibodeau Bickerstaff head to head. And Cody, I'm curious from your perspective, having spent a lot of time around JB Bickerstaff and the group, what's worked for JB this over the course of this season with this group, and you see them just fully tied in going into the playoffs?
I think for him, and this kind of goes hand in hand with his coaching as well, from when we take a look at, what he started to establish in Memphis, and of course what he established in Cleveland, is the fact that when you look at Detroit basketball, when you take a look at the Bad Boys Pistons, when you take a look at the Going to Work Pistons with Chauncey and them, the one thing that both of those eras had was the grit, was the defense and the physicality. And that's something that Coach JB Bickerstaff has already preached throughout his entire coaching career. So he comes to Detroit, he gets an opportunity to buy into the quote unquote Detroit Pistons basketball type of style of play. And you also have the players. And I just think going into this series, that's what he's going to continue to lean upon. And not only that, you also take a look at it from a standpoint that I do believe this is going to be a very defensive series, because you take a look at what Coach JB Bickerstaff has also done throughout his entire career, and that is establish a great defensive foundation. And that's part of the reason why when you take a look at the Pistons, once they really started turning their season around back late December, early January, you're looking at a team that has been ranked top 10 in defense. And I think that's exactly what you're going to see, especially considering that on the opposite side of the court, you got head coach Tom Thibodeau as well, who's another great defensive-minded coach. So it's going to be very good to see who's going to get the upper hands on their opponents. But once again, when you take a look at Coach JB Bickerstaff, knowing his personality, knowing that, this is a coach that has dived into that grit, that grind, that physicality, that defense, that is something that he's going to continue to rely upon throughout this whole playoff series, because that is what got him to help turn this franchise around. And that's part of the reason why we're sitting here. When you list the top 2, top 3 coach of the year candidates, his name is near the top.
Yeah, deservedly so. Fantastic job, I think, by Bickerstaff. And we could kind of go down the list here, but I want to ask you guys for one name. Steve, start with you. Which player needs to have the biggest impact, let's say from a Knick perspective, in order for them to have success?
Well, I think if we're talking someone who has something to prove here, to me, it's Mikal Bridges. He's been the one guy this year who has sort of not lived up to, he's averages 17 points a game. He has his moments. He's had, some game-winning shots. had a 40-point game, but he just hasn't been what you expected. Defensively, he hasn't been the stopper that he'd been back in Phoenix, really. Offensively, he hasn't been the force that he was in Brooklyn. He sort of looks like he's still trying to find his way there. To me, everyone else has sort of proved what they can be. I still, think that Bridges can be an important factor in this series and in the postseason for the Knicks. But I sort of think that there's pressure here that if it doesn't happen, it may not happen in New York, and it may be a sunk cost. And you say, I gave up 5 picks for him. What will I take to move on and get to the next phase of this rebuild?
Yeah, stakes are high. I'm going to just say briefly Josh Hart, because of the way he picked up his shooting before the postseason last year and just punished the Sixers, who left him alone from beyond the arc. I would assume Detroit maybe takes a similar stance, and I'm sure Josh is going to work on his shooting extensively, I assume, heading into the postseason. So maybe we see that again. Also, an underrated player in this series to me, Tim Hardaway Jr. He likes playing in the Garden. I think he likes sticking it to the Knicks, who moved him twice. And so I do think that, Hardaway is going to have a moment or two here in the series. And I'm curious to see how he plays. But I do think he gets up for these games, and he's going to have a whole series here against the Knicks. Cody, give me one guy. Who do you see?
Tobias Harris, by far. When you take a look at the turnaround that the Pistons made this season, Tobias Harris has been matter of fact, he's probably the most important player outside of Cade Cunningham, because when you take a look at, the potential lineup that the Pistons are going to throw out there, early on in the show, I just talked about who's going to step up. The one thing about the Pistons, that they want to shoot the three ball. So, y'all just mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr. You also got Malik Beasley, who I think he finished second in the NBA this season for most threes, right behind Anthony Edwards. But, you know that those are going to be your three. That's your 2 best guys that's going to shoot the 3 ball. However, in games where Tobias Harris has it going, shooting from behind the arc, he gives them another weapon to utilize from 3-point land. Not only that, even when you take a look at rebounding, the Pistons has been one of the most respectable, one of the best rebounding teams in the league this season. The rebounding is going to come from Jalen Duren or Sar Thompson or Isaiah Stewart. However, you add in Tobias Harris' ability to rebound the basketball, he gives them another boost. Even in games where he is struggling, if it's a close game inside the Garden, let's say the Pistons are up by 5 with like 30 seconds left, you're looking at a situation, he's going to be the guy to reel his players in, to tell them, calm down, let's stay the course, and let's come away with this win. Or even if things are vice versa, they are down by 5, it's a close game, the Knicks are trying to go on a run, he's going to be the one to call his team in, show that veteran leadership, and tell them, calm down, let's get back to playing our style of basketball. He is by far the most important player that the Detroit Pistons have outside of Cade Cunningham. And it's not just me. Coach J.B. Bickerstaff has talked about that time and time again, calling Tobias Harris his safety blanket. As a matter of fact, when you go back and you take a look at, somewhat of a struggle that the Pistons had to end the season, I believe over the last 8 games, they went 2-6. Majority of those games that they lost, Tobias Harris was not in. And in those games Tobias Harris does not play, that's when the Pistons struggle the most. In those games where Tobias Harris is struggling on the offensive side of the ball, struggling on defense, those are the games where the Pistons come up short. But if he is healthy, if he's out there, whether if it's his veteran presence or just his ability to play both ends of the court, that's when you look at the situation and say the Detroit Pistons are a very dangerous team.
Yeah, New York's own Tobias Harris. I have a soft spot for Tobias as a local guy. Looking forward to seeing him in MSG and throughout the series. Now, guys, we're going to pivot to a segment called What We Learned. What We Learned is presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. What we learned lately was Tom Thibodeau and the organization. Tom Thibodeau would say it's the medical department's decision to rest players at the end of this season. You saw it in that Detroit game. I think 3 regulars rested. Karl Towns was out against Cleveland, and then everybody sat basically, except for 6 seconds of Mikal Bridges against Brooklyn. I'm just wondering, Steve, what did you make of that? Because last year's team, that was not the case. They were playing an overtime game against Chicago, game 82. And so it seemed like a different approach. What were your thoughts on it?
It's funny for all of the talk about what Thibodeau has done and, health and minutes police, all this stuff. The Knicks are going into the postseason remarkably healthy.
Yeah.
Ariel Huckporty, who probably wouldn't see the court anyway, is the only guy who's not healthy right now. Rhythm is the only thing you're actually looking for. And that was the question of rhythm versus rest was, if you play these guys just to get them more time on the court together. But, somebody mentioned earlier, Jalen Brunson missing a month. It's sort of, I think, is a sort of a hidden benefit here in that, he had time to rest his body, sort of the load that he takes on all season. To me, I think, it's so much. I mean, so much of I think is made about nothing with the minutes because there's, you just can't convince me that playing 35 minutes versus playing 37 minutes makes a difference. And we're going to see 7 or 8 guys in the rotation here. But I think the Knicks are going in with those 8 guys are healthy. They're going to have basically a mini training camp here. I think you mentioned, Ian, about Josh Hart working on his shooting. This should be the week where guys are, endlessly in the gym refining things, working on that rhythm, working on skills. I think they're going into this as well as you can.
And Cody, for you, you mentioned that 2-6 finish with the Pistons. What do you think is the biggest question mark for the group going into this series, just based on how they have played and then what you saw at the end there?
For me, it's the same thing, health. Because like I just mentioned, 2-6, Tobias Harris missed majority of that, and you just take a look at the situation. It wasn't just Tobias. I mean, the last 2 games of the regular season, Isaiah Stewart was out due to a knee injury, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but towards the end of the Knicks game that they played here in Detroit Thursday, right before he fouled out, he started limping a little bit, and he even limped to the bench when it was all over. So that was a little bit of a concern. So hopefully, taking the last 2 games off and then, having an opportunity, basically have a whole nother week off before they play on Saturday. Hopefully that gets him an opportunity to get that knee healthy. But, it's just that time of the season where a lot of players are just battling through a little knick-knack injuries, nothing major, but at the same time, you just wonder whether or not if that's going to be a main issue moving forward, because I know you guys just alluded to it when you was talking about Karl Anthony Towns, with him being one of the most gifted big men that we have seen, especially in today's game. It's going to be very important for Isaiah Stewart to be out there on the court as this team defensive anchor. And if he's battling a knee injury, then you're looking at a situation where he's not going to be 100% healthy. If he isn't 100% healthy, you're looking at a situation where Karl Anthony Towns might have an opportunity to dominate this series. And you're looking at a matchup to where when you go back to Thursday game, I believe Isaiah Stewart had held Karl Anthony Towns to like 2 of 8 shooting when it was, when he was guarding him one-on-one. So, just the health in general. Another guy that was, popped up on the injury report during either the last day or the last 2 games of the regular season was Asar Thompson. He was battling with his own respective knee injury. Once again, you're looking at a guy that's going to be his primary role in this season is going to be slowing down Jalen Brunson, a guy, once again, who has averaged 30 points since he became a Knick in the playoffs. And if he isn't 100%, that's going to give Jalen Brunson an opportunity to go out there and get close to that scoring average. So, just like with any other team, the number one thing, health, whether or not they are able to stay healthy, to be as gritty, as physical, that defensive-minded team that we saw throughout the season. Because there's one thing about the Pistons that we've seen in time and time again. When they're healthy, they could be one of the dangerous teams in the league. But the only thing is, if somebody is hampered, if somebody, will have to miss game 1, game 2, or game 3, or whatever the case might be, and that's that little, that the player that might miss a game, you're looking at a situation where that's going to just derail what the Pistons like to do in general.
Yeah, it's health at this time of year, and it's. Yeah, I think the Knicks, Steve makes a great point about the Knicks and their health. And bigger picture, though, Steve, with the Knicks. Talking about what's at stake. And I think Knicks win the series, get to the second round, compete in the second round. I think that, there's less of a chance that something major happens. But we talked about it at the top of the show. I do think that, earlier in the year, I thought, whatever happens in the playoffs, everybody's going to be back from a management coaching standpoint. Again, just talking to people around the league and around the situation, I don't think that's I'm not as sure on that at this point with Tom Thibodeau in particular. I do think the stakes are high there for Tom Thibodeau for this series and then the following series, whatever happens. And for you mentioned Mikal Bridges. What else is at stake here in terms of Tibbs, Bridges, and what are you hearing?
Look, I think everything is, because when you get to a point like this, we talk about the Pistons and the Knicks were there. They were a building team, and you could kind of see like the future. Well, they made the future now by making those two moves for Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, and signing OG Anunoby to that contract. This is the group that they built. And look, I don't think it's the wrong thing. I think, when you have a Jalen Brunson, whatever the window is for him, age-wise, health-wise, he's a guy that is a championship player, I think. And if you put the right pieces around him, they believe they did. And I think that ups the stakes. Now, if it doesn't work, my experience as a veteran writer is very, very rarely does the guy who put the team together take the blame. It's somebody pointing a finger at the coach, or it's pointing a finger at a player, for why it didn't happen with the pieces that were assembled. So to me, I think everything's at stake here. I think it's Mikal Bridges' future with the team, whether he gets that extension and stays here as a part of this. I think it's, do they look to trade for, the names have already been out there. Kevin Durant's going to be available. Giannis Antetokounmpo could become available if they get knocked out in the first round. I think, it could be the coach, it could be the front office, it could be a player, it could be a star move. I wouldn't rule out anything at this point, because the same moves that made them feel an urgency last summer to make this happen now, I'm sure are only, the stakes are raised now on that it's a year later and you've got to make this happen. So if it's not working, that's the move you make is sunk cost. You start going to the next thing that's going to make it work.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, on the stakes being super high. With Kevin Durant in particular, though, obviously we saw Mike Budenholzer let go in Phoenix, and I think the league just thinks Kevin Durant's going to be moved in the offseason. If I'm Phoenix, though, I'm asking Kevin Durant, hey, who can we hire to settle this thing down with you? Who can we hire to get you back here with Devin Booker? We'll figure something out with Bradley Beal, because they're so committed already. But let's say it doesn't go that way. I know the Knicks have been mentioned a lot. To me, and this is not just kind of conjecture, but just based on, stuff that I've discussed with people, I see it as more of a long shot. I think he'd be a fantastic fit, and a lot depends on what happens in the playoffs. If the Knicks go through the first two rounds, feel more confident that they're a Kevin Durant away. Maybe the wind blows a different way, but right now I do think it's a more of a longer shot than other trades for other star players that you want to put on the table. I think everybody's keeping an eye on number 34 up north in Milwaukee. But yeah, I agree, Steve. Just stakes super high. And go ahead.
I was going to say I think look, Durant is an amazing player, but I don't think I'd feel any more secure if I was Tom Thibodeau, given the run of coaches that Kevin Durant has left in his wake here.
Yeah, a lot of not bodies on his resume because it wasn't him directly, but there's a lot of coaches selling their homes. Hopefully, they're renting in the wake of coaching Durant. Now we're going to a segment that we like to call the Talkback. We're bringing in my friend and yours, Matt Spendley, the Big Spend. He's got some questions for us from the audience. Matt, what do you have for us?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on, as always. All right, we are starting off from YouTube. Our guy Scar on YouTube. Cody, I'm going to throw this one right to you because he says, haven't watched much Pistons. What would be their game plan for exploiting Cat? So curious from what the Pistons have been able to execute offensively. We've talked a lot in the space about Cat's defense this year at the 5. So curious for the Pistons offensively, how do you think they'll try to attack Cat and take advantage of his defense at the 5?
Simple. Get him to switch. Get him out there on the perimeter on, somebody like Cade Cunningham and let him go 1-on-1. Because that's the one thing about Cade, man. He can get it. He can score, regardless of who is guarding him. Especially if you get a switch and you have a big man on him, you definitely looking at a situation where Cade has an opportunity to blow right past him, attack the rim, draw the foul, or even, have an opportunity to get his shot off. Cade can score in a variety of different ways, and I think that's going to be one matchup that they're definitely going to try to exploit.
Steve, I know we've talked, obviously, in the space too about the Mitch Cat tandem. Our guy Jay from East on YouTube is saying, let me find the question also on my screen. I think Mitch needs to start for this Detroit series. We know that they're not really going to change up the starting lineup, and Mitch and Cat have played 47 minutes together this season. How much do you think we'll see of Mitch and Cat together in Detroit against the playoffs?
It's interesting. I don't think we'll see a lot of it just because sort of what we just mentioned here. Cat is a liability when you're switching Cade onto a guy. But I just think his offense is such a factor that they're going to have a hard time taking him off. And I think the other guys are so versatile to play Mitch with Cat sort of. I guess I'm looking at the right word here. Sort of creates a mismatch where you have guys that really are not switchable there. Josh, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, all are very interchangeable. I think Thibodeau likes that. I think foul-wise, too, they have to protect these guys. I don't think we'll see a lot of it together. Look, I think it is an interesting concept. And the most interesting thing about it is if you could somehow combine Mitch and Cat into one player, that would be the ideal player the Knicks need, because every time Mitch isn't on the floor, you think you need his defense. And then when you see offensively, the drop-off from Cat to him is just off a cliff.
Maybe that's the fix in the offseason, Steve. Just figure out some kind of mad science.
Science is doing things these days.
We're whipping up the graphic already behind us. Don't you worry.
The Knicks training staff has done a tremendous job this year.
They have.
I'm not ruling that out that they can pull that off.
Anthony Goenega, what do you have up your sleeve, buddy?
MVP.
Yeah. So we're gonna hit final thoughts here, Cody. I'm sorry, I don't want to jump the gun. Matt, anything else?
No, Ian, last one. I wanted to ask everybody because it's kind of been a discussion. I've seen some people surmising that Cade Cunningham might be the best player in the series, and I think a lot of the Knicks fans are taking that personally. So I want to go down the list, and I want all you guys to tell me who's the best player in the series. Cody, I have to start with you because you're the Pistons guy. So who is the best player in the series? Tell us.
Man, it's tough because I'm gonna go Jalen. I'm gonna go Jalen only because this is the only year that we've seen Cade have this type of year. And, Jalen Brunson, even before he got to New York, was the last season that he had in Dallas. You thought that backcourt was going to be something special in Dallas. And boy, I don't know what Dallas was thinking. But, I'm going to go Jalen only because I'm giving him the edge due to experience. Because, yes, Cade Cunningham has had a phenomenal season. Yes, it's been a pleasure watching Cade, finally take that step to All-Star and All-NBA. However, now it's the playoffs, and, things are going to change in the playoffs. When you take a look at Jalen Brunson, not only does he have the experience, but, we seen it longer with Jalen. And once again, and I know this is something I kept coming back to this entire time, Jalen is averaging 31 points per game in the playoffs as a member of the Knicks. That is third since 2023. That is a remarkable achievement. And we watched what he was able to do last year. And if the Knicks are healthy, you're looking at a situation where they probably get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And those are the things that definitely going to play into a factor as to why I'm taking Jalen as the best player. But my guy, Cade, like if this is Jalen, Cade is like right there. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Ian, then Steve.
I'm with Cody for everything he said. Brunson, specifically based on the experience and the body of work. But I think Cade's coming, man. He's, regardless of what happens in this series, what percentage he shoots, whatever, he stays healthy. He's coming. The next few years, he's going to be, that's one of those starting guard spots in the East, I think, is his to lose as you look ahead here. But right now, Jalen Brunson.
I guess, first of all, I feel sorry for Nico Harrison catching strays even in this discussion, but deservedly so. Look, Cade is number one overall pick for a reason. He's going to be all NBA this year. I have a vote, and he's certainly going to be part of it. To me, you still go with Jalen Brunson for a couple things. The playoffs are just different. He's proved he can do it at that level in the playoffs and maybe even raise his level. With the help he's got, to me, he's just a guy that you can rely on here, and he's going to find the answers for you.
That's what I got, Ian. Now it's back to you. Now you can go.
Thank you, Big Spend. We will see you again soon. Final thoughts here, guys. Coty, I want to start with you. Can you give us a series prediction?
Oh man, I hate series predictions. I think this is going to be, like I mentioned, one of the grittiest defensive-minded series that we're going to get in the first round. I think it's going to be close every single game. I don't see a situation where one team is going to blow the other team out. However, I think I'm going to have to go Knicks in 7, only because at the end of the day, man, I just can't look past the experience that the Knicks have. And like I mentioned, yes, the Pistons, veteran players have stepped up throughout this whole entire season. However, once again, I just go back to the core majority of the players that Bickerstaff is relying upon is young players, who are still, if they're not trying to find their way, they're getting close to breaking, getting broken free. I mean, one guy that, we haven't really talked about too much is Jalen Duren. He's going to be another big X factor for the Pistons, and whether or not if he can tilt this series in their favor, given his ability, to dominate the glass, given his ability to be a solid presence in the inside. However, Jalen, he has had his up and down so far on the defensive side of the ball. And yes, Isaiah Stewart is your defensive anchor, but there's going to be moments where it's just going to be him and Cat down on the low post together. And then, like Shaquille O'Neal say, will that be barbecue chicken at that point for somebody as skilled as Karl Anthony Towns? So, I think the series, once again, is going to come down to experience. And if that's the case, it's going to be the Knicks in 7.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off that. I'll say Knicks in 6. But if Detroit gets one of those first two, I think things could go sideways a little bit. But I do think overall, I think Knicks in 6. I feel good about that. Steve, how about you?
It's kind of funny. We talk about this matchup and we think of guys, JB Bickerstaff, who went against the Knicks 2 years ago and probably affected his not being in Cleveland anymore. Tobias Harris last year with Philadelphia in the playoffs, what the Knicks did to him probably is part of the reason he's in Detroit this year. Duren and Ivy were players the Knicks loved on draft night, and I think would have liked to have had both of them. And now they wind up, Ivy, I guess, won't be a part of this, but guys that they've got to get past. To me, it's experience, it's health for the Knicks right now. I just think as much as this could be a fight, I think the experience that the Knicks have versus the inexperience of the Pistons as a group, this group together, is going to be a factor. I think if the Pistons could somehow grab game 1 and believe maybe it's a different thing, but coming into the Garden is tough. I think it's going to be 4 or 5 games. I think the Knicks will take them at the Garden. It's 2-0, and then the whole thing is, how do the Pistons respond? How do the Knicks fans respond? Are they filling up Detroit despite what the Pistons have tried to do with the tickets there? I think the Pistons need to strike early to show that they can be in this series and that they're ready to be that kind of team that elevates that next level. If they can't do that early, I think this ends quickly.
Yeah,
and I think and one thing I would say, I think the Knicks would like to do that because the Pistons beat you up, and the Knicks need to be healthy for the next round.
Yeah, that's where I am too. The shorter series, the better for the Knicks because of that. And Coty, just piggybacking off what Steve said with the tickets. And your buddies have tickets. They could probably make a lot of money. Somebody in New York trying to get to Detroit for the series. So I'm just throwing it out there.
I like that plan because as soon as I saw that, I thought back to, I think it was 2 years ago when the Knicks played against Philly. I think that was in I can't remember which round it was, but it was
the first round last year. Yep.
And like majority of Philly's arena was just orange and blue skies, as they say in New York. So when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Keep those Knicks fans away. Keep those Knicks fans away.
Just saying, though, if any of your friends, they could probably cover the rent for next month if they want to get off some of their tickets. So a Knicks fan. Anyway, that will do it for us. I'm done giving financial advice. Be sure, though, to check out Begley. There's going to be a Begley's mailbag post on SNY Knicks feed tomorrow. We're going to do a playoff edition of the mailbag later this week. And we'll be back with the Putback during the series as well. But Steve Popper, Coty M. Davis, can't thank you guys enough for joining us. Thanks for the insight, and hope to see everybody soon.